Disclaimer. In this episode, substance abuse disorder is discussed heavily. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but I present facts in this podcast. I do not condone the villainization of addicts in any way, shape, or form. If you're of that mindset, please keep your opinion to yourself. The purpose of this episode is to shine light on the disappearance of a little girl, not to debate about drug addiction. Please remain respectful in the comments. Thank you. Hello. Welcome to Wicked Words, the podcast where you get to listen to my terrible New England accent while I talk about true crime and other dark topics. Today, we have a very long episode, and I apologize in advance if that's not your thing. But I heard about this case from another true crime channel, and I immediately had to look further into it. So I hope that, I do some justice in this. Let's jump right into it because I don't want to take up too much time. Back in the 90s, doctors began to loosely prescribe opioids for pain under the impression that relief outweighed the risk of addiction. They couldn't have been more wrong, and the unleashing of pain pills in the nation created a slew of citizens stuck in a cycle of compulsion. By the time the opioid crackdown began, it was already too late. Without a legitimate supplier, addicts began to seek out their drugs on the street. The black market offered something no doctor could, an alternative that was stronger and cheaper: heroin. Massachusetts, like other states, struggled to meet the demand of those in search of treatment from their habits. It almost seemed as though the proximity of its location to the water made it tremendously more vulnerable to the epidemic, since the transportation of narcotics flowed through the ports with ease. In previous episodes, I've discussed the cycle of poverty, addiction, and abuse that is systemic, especially in Massachusetts, and the Sorry household was not immune to that unfortunate loop. Crystal Renee was born on September 14th of 1990, one of a pair of twin girls delivered to 32-year-old Robin Flanagan. Crystal and her sister Brittany were hospitalized for the first 6 months of their lives, being treated for twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome and fetal alcohol syndrome. When the girls were finally brought home, they were raised solely by Robin, as their father had been incarcerated. The environment at the Groveland Street home in Haverhill was a chaotic one, filled with domestic violence and substance abuse. Throughout the years, Crystal's oldest brother, TJ, took the reign, raising his 6 younger siblings on the weekly occasion their parents were arrested. By her sophomore year at Whittier Regional Vocational Technical High School, Crystal was afflicted with the family curse. She drank and smoked pot with her sister, and eventually the twins turned to harder substances. At the end of the summer of 2012, Crystal began dating Adam Ace Montgomery, a 22-year-old from New Hampshire. He, like Crystal, had a checkered past, albeit his was a bit darker. Adam was expelled from Manchester High School when he was caught in possession of a weapon on school grounds. Skipping out on court for these charges, he found himself arrested the subsequent year when he and a female accomplice followed a girl home, broke in, and assaulted her, accusing her of stealing a cell phone. Shortly after this incident, he was arrested yet again for stalking a 15-year-old ex-girlfriend and threatening her with a knife. She was not the only teenager tormented by Adam, however. In 2008, he stabbed a teen in the leg before throwing him out of a moving vehicle because Adam believed the boy had sold him fake drugs. That same year, Adam, along with 2 of his family members, became suspects in the murder of Darlene Guzman, a father of 3 who was found shot in an abandoned parking lot in Lynn, Massachusetts. Similar to Crystal, Adam had an active heroin addiction. But when in late 2013 she discovered she was pregnant, the homeless couple agreed to get sober for their unborn child, each entering programs to assist with their treatment. While Crystal was relieved to escape Adam's abuse, she was also heartbroken when she learned that he had quickly withdrew himself from the program. She had hopes they would be a family together and provide for their baby what they never had. But Crystal didn't let this obstacle deter her from her goal. As she was entering her third trimester, Crystal received the devastating news that Adam was being sought in connection to the shooting of a man in Haverhill, Massachusetts. He had been waiting in the hallway of a Cedar Street apartment to meet an unknown man for drugs when a group approached him. Instantly, Adam knew he was being robbed, so he pulled out his .38 caliber Taurus. One of the men, Robbie Jacobs, grabbed the firearm, and during the tussle, it went off. The round hit Robbie in his chin, exiting his left temple. Another man, Cameron Vitelloni, returned fire, hitting Adam in the right arm. But Adam took off before police could show up. It took U.S. Marshals 4 days to locate and apprehend Adam. And 2 months later, he pleaded guilty, being remanded to only 18 months in prison. On June 7, 2014, Crystal went into labor, and with Adam on speakerphone, she gave birth to their first and only child together, a little girl they named Harmony Renee. From birth, she was afflicted with numerous health conditions, including being blind in her right eye, but this never stopped Harmony. She was described as active and social, possessing language skills equivalent to a school-age child at just 2 years old. This made for a charming little girl who, despite not being a morning person, was always bubbly and smiling. The parallels drawn between Crystal's and Harmony's upbringings are quite uncanny. Harmony was brought home from the hospital under Crystal's care exclusively. It wasn't long until the stress of being postpartum and a single parent, while struggling with recent sobriety and witnessing her mother suffer from the late stages of cirrhosis, ultimately compounded, and Crystal relapsed. Following 3 separate, substantiated reports of neglect, Massachusetts Department of Child and Families, DCF, removed Harmony at only 2 months old and placed her into foster care. Crystal's mother passed away by the end of 2018, but with new year comes new beginnings. In January 2015, Harmony met her father for the first time ever during a supervised prison visit, and immediately afterward, custody was returned to Crystal conditionally. Hope was restored that she, Adam, and Harmony could perhaps be a family. Adam earned his GED and maintained his sobriety while in prison. Crystal was back in a recovery shelter with her little girl in her arms. Life was good, until 2 months later, Adam attempted to exert his control over Crystal, demanding she prostitute herself to get money for his inmate account. Coming to terms with the fact that their relationship would never work the way she had desperately wanted, Crystal wrote Adam a letter, ending things for good. But this act jeopardized everything, since any contact with your abuser was a violation of the shelter's policy, regardless of the reason. Crystal was given little notice that she and Harmony needed to leave. Frantic and finding herself homeless with a 10-month-old baby, Crystal was relieved when a couple she was acquainted with invited the mother and daughter to stay with them. Unbeknownst to Crystal, they too were grappling with their drug dependency. Tempted by the promise of alleviated tension, Crystal relapsed, overdosing multiple times, resulting in Harmony's removal from her care right around the girl's first birthday. Despite having her second visit with Adam, Massachusetts DCF changed Harmony's goal from reunification with her parents to adoption in hopes of offering some stability to the toddler. While Harmony was growing in her foster care, discovering all sorts of new foods, and showing a strong desire to learn how to read, baby Doe was discovered off of Deer Island in Boston Harbor. For months, this child remained faceless and nameless, gaining the country's sympathy. Crystal was just thankful for Michelle, the woman who was caring for Harmony as if she were her own child, providing a safe and stable home. Pregnant with her second baby, Crystal remained optimistic that she would be able to give her kids the same opportunity one day. Throughout 2015, the baby Doe case evolved, and Bostonians learned the name of the little girl they had all come to care for, Bella Bond. Bella, like Harmony, was born to a single mother who was addicted to heroin. Rochelle Bond, Bella's mom, had also been heavily involved with DCF for a majority of her life. It was later determined that Bella had been in the custody of Rochelle during a period of relapse, and her mother's boyfriend had beat her to death, supposedly believing she was possessed. Instead of calling emergency services, Rochelle helped her boyfriend, Michael McCarthy, cover up the crime, disposing of her daughter by the Edison power plant in South Boston. The Office of Child Advocates reviewed the case and condemned the state as well as the Department of Child and Families for their part in the failure to keep Bella's best interest first and foremost. In September 2016, a full year after his release from prison, Adam finally reached out to Massachusetts DCF to inquire about visiting with Harmony. By this point, Adam had married a woman named Kayla, and the two were expecting a child. He had obtained housing with his grandmother, uncle, and brother, providing a support system for his sobriety. For the subsequent 5 months, Adam consistently visited with Harmony at the Haverhill DCF office until January of 2017, when the case was transferred to the Jackson Square DCF office, a result of Crystal's relocation to another recovery program. 2 months later, Harmony was placed back with Crystal, but it didn't last long. After months of ceased contact, DCF finally had been successful in speaking with Adam. And during this conversation, they were informed that he had been having unsupervised overnight visitations with Harmony. This was a violation of the conditional custody Crystal had gained, and paired with the multiple reports of neglect being phoned in, Harmony was once again removed in January of 2018, being placed with the same foster family from before. After some time, Michelle reached out to DCF and had informed them she believed that the repeated attempts to reunite Harmony with her mother were starting to affect her. She was showing signs of insecurity, always questioning whether she was going to be adopted or whether she was going home. And Michelle felt a specialized therapeutic setting would be best. In response to this, Harmony was removed from Michelle's care and placed in a respite home. By the end of the summer of 2018, Adam once again reached out to DCF to set up visitations with Harmony. And on February 22, 2019, a hearing was held in a Lawrence family courtroom. After no legal objections were raised, Adam was granted sole custody of Harmony Renee. It was estimated that she had spent approximately 40 hours of her 4 years in Adam's presence, and he was handed total control over her, simply for contributing sperm. No assessments had been completed on Adam by DCF in Massachusetts or in New Hampshire, where Adam lived. A home study had not been conducted, and the status of Kayla's sobriety was unknown. Considering she was Adam's wife, the mother of Harmony's half-siblings, and presumably a potential caregiver, information was required about her too. None of this was done, yet the DCF and family court cases in the state of Massachusetts for Harmony Montgomery had been officially closed. Crystal felt helpless. She was fighting to stay clean and had been stuck in another hearing appealing the adoption of her son the same day that Adam was granted custody. In one fell swoop, she lost both of her children. She was now at the mercy of Adam, her former abuser, to have a relationship with Harmony. On the rare occasion she was allowed to visit, he lingered, never allowing the two privacy. It wasn't long before Crystal began to suspect that Adam and Kayla weren't as sober as they had claimed. She would be zipping around the house cleaning while he stared at the TV screen, playing video games, sporadically yelling at their boys. Crystal's motherly instincts would be kicked into full overdrive after her last interaction with Harmony. On Easter, she FaceTimed her daughter, and as usual, Adam remained in the background of the call. But there was something about the look in Harmony's eyes that struck Crystal as strange. She seemed like a shell of herself, Crystal recalled later. Adam muted the phone many times, appearing agitated. Had Crystal known this would be her final encounter with Harmony, I'm positive she would have pressed harder, but naively she assumed Harmony would be okay in her father's care until Crystal could establish herself enough to take Harmony back. Despite the sunshine from the summer outdoors, inside the Guilford Street home Harmony and her family lived, there was always a storm raging. At the beginning of the year, Adam's grandmother Helen moved out and relocated to Florida while she recovered from heart surgery. Adam's brother Michael and his girlfriend followed along, leaving Kevin, Kayla, Adam, and the kids, which didn't end amicably with Kevin's departure in April. By July, an anonymous caller alleged to the Manchester DCF that they had witnessed Harmony with a black eye. After a brief inspection, DCF informed police they didn't find any sign of abuse. However, they felt the family was at high risk for future incidents. That same month, Kayla phoned for police assistance. She had invited a friend over who was now refusing to leave, and he was also under the influence. Only 3 days later, a concerned neighbor called 911 after hearing fighting and the sounds of crying children coming from Adam and Kayla's home. DCF followed up with the Montgomerys in August, and during this visit, a red mark in addition to bruising under Harmony's eyelid was noticed. The injury was explained away by Adam as an accident between young siblings still learning how to play nicely with their toys. Although there was no electricity in the home, the refrigerator was connected to a portable generator in the driveway, and the cabinets were filled with food. The children appeared happy and healthy, so when an anonymous tip was received pertaining to possible squatters at the 77 Guilford Street address, police essentially shrugged it off as a civil matter. This wasn't their last call to the house that month. Just days after the unknown caller, Adam reached out to Manchester PD. He accused his uncle Kevin Montgomery of harassing him. Before the end of August, one more call came in from somebody stating that they thought squatters may have been living on the property because it was covered in trash, a condition deemed as disheveled but not unsafe by New Hampshire agencies. September started with a woman named Sarah asking police to check in on the welfare of the Montgomery's dog. She heard yelling, followed by what sounded like smacking and yelping, drowned out with more screaming, before the dog was abandoned in the yard for hours on end. 1 week later, Manchester police returned to the house after Adam called emergency services during an altercation with his uncle. As the year drew to a close, the visits from MPD became less frequent, although at the end of September, another worried neighbor requested a welfare check. The house that was infamous for police activity, loud music, and general sketchiness was eerily silent, and it looked as though the car in the driveway had been broken into. The day after Adam and Kayla welcomed their third child into the world, Adam reported his silver 2010 Chrysler Sebring as stolen after he lent it to a friend who failed to return it. After Thanksgiving, the Montgomerys were forced to leave the foreclosed-upon Guilford Street home, and supposedly slept in their car until a space at a shelter could be secured. Around Christmas time, Adam, Kayla, and their 3 children found shelter at Families in Transition, a program on Lake Avenue in Manchester. When asked about Harmony by their social worker, Adam revealed she had been living with her mother in Massachusetts for months. Manchester DCF was unable to confirm this with Crystal, and on January 12, 2020, the police were called to 77 Guilford Street once more, when a lady named Karen saw the front door kicked open and was uncertain whether the property had been abandoned. When asked about this, Adam made the statement that he had just moved out, and he left the door open to air it out because there was a very bad odor. By August 2021, Crystal had been strong in her sobriety, even having another child with her fiancé, but anxiety filled the space where Harmony should have been. After begging for calls and visits with Harmony were met with blocks and silence, and her numerous calls to police and DCF were ignored, Crystal initiated her own investigation into her daughter's whereabouts. She gathered as much information as she could, using fake Facebook accounts and paid white page listings. She called the local schools to ascertain whether Harmony had been enrolled, and she drove by the addresses associated with Adam and Kayla. Crystal couldn't have known that the couple were separated following a major dispute with Kayla's mother. Kayla took her kids and moved into a shelter, while Adam stayed in a sober house prior to a temporary move to Maine with an unknown woman. By the end of 2021, Crystal was tired of the lack of response she was receiving, and at last she wrote a letter to the mayor of Manchester on December 29th, threatening a lawsuit, and on New Year's Eve, Manchester police contacted Adam and his new girlfriend Kelsey Small, who were asleep in a parked car. Police seized Adam's phone with slight protest and spoke to Kelsey in case she had any knowledge of Harmony's location. Funny enough, she was shocked to even learn that Adam had another daughter. He had never mentioned her. A press conference was held, announcing the official disappearance of Harmony Montgomery. A cry for any information echoed throughout New England. Only days later, Adam was arrested for second-degree felony assault, endangering the welfare of a child, and interference with custody after failing to produce Harmony to DCF. During his questioning, Adam refused to speak with the mere mention of her name, demanding a lawyer after only 30 minutes. Kayla was arrested too, on charges of welfare fraud, since she had been collecting about $1,500 in food stamps for Harmony, who was clearly not in her care. Months crept by, and in an attempt to increase pressure on the Montgomerys, Manchester PD arrested the couple again on charges of firearm theft, which had occurred 6 months earlier. By June, a credible source had come forward with knowledge, resulting in the local cops pairing up with the FBI to conduct a search of the 644 Union Street apartment in which the Montgomerys once resided. The community was in disbelief as they watched a fridge, floor paneling, and more be removed from the house and packed into a box truck. Not long after, Kayla was arrested for a 3rd time, charged with perjury for lying in her grand jury testimony, but she was released just 3 days later. 2 long months came and went until finally the authorities announced the case was now being investigated as a homicide. The police chief's voice cracked several times as he rushed through his statement, shifting uncomfortably from side to side as he extended thanks to the many officers who had been involved. As of present, Kayla has been arrested yet again for failing to appear in court, and Adam remains in jail. A hearing in the matter of evidence suppression was held just last week. Everything is still in progress, but no murder charges have been filed yet. I'm not going to discuss the hearing in this episode because it's truly frustrating. I watched this older female attorney defend Adam and just wondered how. I understand that we're all entitled to a fair trial, but I wish that he would have been stupid enough to represent himself. Unfortunately, due to all the legal trouble he's been in, he's a bit smart and knows how to play the system. All right, moving into fun fact and rant time. I want to start by talking about Harmony as much as I can, even though there wasn't a whole lot of information about her, given her age. Because of her medical conditions, Harmony gained access to early intervention services offered through the state. My youngest also received these services, and they're a game changer to children with disabilities, so I can only imagine they helped spark her love for books as well as her affinity for dolls, which she probably picked up through play therapy. Crystal remembers her as being mother hen to her little brother Jameson. She absolutely loved to care for him because she was just such an empathetic little girl. I was able to find a lot more about Crystal. And I have to admit that when I first heard about this case, I thought some pretty negative things about her. But after researching, I actually feel bad for her. Her childhood was less than ideal, and she is already filled with shame and guilt that comes with being a recovering parent. And then on top of that, she has all these horrible comments being left everywhere for her. And it's like about her possible involvement with Harmony's disappearance. I couldn't imagine the struggle she faces with her sobriety during this time. But she says that she remains strong because she knows that she can get more, she can do more to help Harmony without a needle in her arm. And you honestly have to respect that. On a personal note, I feel like when you're raised by addicts or you're surrounded by addicts at a very young age, you tend to either decide you're never going to do it or you get involved in it very heavily, very quickly. And unfortunately for Crystal, she was one of the latter. Crystal has stated that she tried to file a missing person report in New Hampshire for Harmony, but because she was not the custodial parent, she was not allowed to. Which could absolutely be the case, since police tend to view issues like interference with parental custody and parental kidnapping as matters to be handled by the court. However, with a quick Google search, I was able to find that missingkids.org will open a case regardless of custody matters, since their priority is the child's safety. It's just a reminder that when you feel like you've hit a roadblock, there is always a way around them. There's always resources out there. While the public has access to a 100-page report from the OCA and 7-page statement from New Hampshire, Crystal has hundreds and hundreds of documents from multiple agencies in both states. And after reviewing them all, she's come to the conclusion that Adam and or Kayla most likely murdered Harmony out of anger or spite. In the press conference, the police announced that they believe as a result of biological matter discovered that they feel homicide was committed. And I'm speculating that they probably compared any DNA that they found to Crystal and confirmed whether or not it was Harmony's. I don't want to get into my own theories, but when you look at the evidence available, it obviously doesn't paint a good picture. It's just unfathomable how any parent could abuse or neglect their child, let alone to the point of death. I could never comprehend how anyone could hurt a child, period. Initially, Crystal outraged people when she came out with her theory that Adam may have sold their daughter for drugs because, according to her, he would do anything for drugs. But after the police prepared her for the worst case scenario and declared the case a homicide investigation, the fleeting hope that she could still be alive vanished. Now, all Crystal wants is to bring Harmony home and give her spirit rest. She says she can't move on until she gets answers and knows the truth about what happened to Harmony. There isn't a lot of information available about Adam, and I assume that's exactly how he wants it. He seems to enjoy having control over the knowledge that people have, and this is evident in the interrogation when he would just give enough information to answer the questions that police had for him. He was raised by his grandmother in New Hampshire, despite the fact that he loves to tell people he is from Revere, Massachusetts. He had a daughter with another woman named Christine, who Crystal remains in contact with to this day. Neighbors and social workers described Adam as an attentive father, but having age-inappropriate expectations for his children. A perfect example of this is when he left Harmony at 4 years old in charge of her infant brother while he was in the bathroom doing God knows what. And when the baby started crying, Harmony put her hand over the baby's mouth because she didn't know how to quiet him. When Adam saw this, he, quote, bashed her around the house, unquote, according to his uncle Kevin. Kevin believed that Adam had relapsed early in 2021, and apparently there was a huge family feud because Adam was accused of selling heirlooms. Kevin says that he made anonymous calls to DCF for 3 months before he was told that his claim would probably be taken more seriously if he left his name. So while he was afraid to let his nephew know that he was the one calling, he still left his information with intake. Kevin remembers instances in which Adam struck Harmony hard on the butt and made her stand in the corner for hours. But corporal punishment is justifiable to an extent under New Hampshire law. NHDCF estimated there are over 10,000 suspected cases of child abuse reported to them each year, with Harmony's being just one spotlighted recently. Kevin told the agency that Adam would make Harmony clean the toilet with her own toothbrush. Again, while harsh and disgusting, these actions could be interpreted as discipline legally, not child abuse, so it walks this thin line of what is acceptable. In my opinion, no form of corporal punishment should be allowed. If a child isn't old enough to speak, they're not old enough to comprehend that there are consequences to their actions. And if they are old enough to talk, then why even bother hitting them? Explain to them that their behavior is wrong and why it's wrong, how they can correct it and move forward. When you hit your child, you're only teaching them that it's acceptable to put your hands on other people who you don't agree with. And I'm not delusional. I have 2 children of my own who are now in their teens, and I have never had to hit them. As a child who received what was deemed acceptable physical punishment, a 6 or 7-year-old girl stands absolutely no chance against a grown man. And it's just an exertion of power by somebody who's insecure over somebody who is weaker than them. But what do I know? I'm not a psychologist. Don't come for me. Adam's brother Michael Jr. also expressed concern for the safety and well-being of his niece. But let me interject right here with my TED Talk because I feel like this is the perfect segue, and I can't continue to discuss the facts without first giving some of my opinion. I have mentioned this vicious cycle of poverty, addiction, and abuse so many times before because it plays such a significant role in the development of how these crimes can come to fruition in the first place. Not to say that things like this don't happen in more affluent communities, but they're certainly not as prevalent. New Hampshire and Massachusetts are 2 states specifically riddled by addiction. Boston even has its own sub-city called Methadone Mile, which was recently renamed Recovery Road for a more inspirational feel. While a major part of substance abuse disorder may be environmental, biology can break even the most successful people. If the genetic predisposition is there, it doesn't take much to alter the brain chemistry and form a life-destroying addiction. In fact, it reminds me of a story from Reddit about a user named Spontaneous Age. I don't want to delve too much into it, but feel free to Google it if you're interested. He decided one day he was bored and wanted to try heroin for the first time and completely destroyed his life and rebuilt it over years. And he documented that through Reddit posts, which you can totally still find today. But back to the point. Like many diseases, there is no cure, but treatment is available. And similar to other chronic conditions, substance abuse disorder does not maintain this linear recovery pattern. Some days may be great. You might feel strong, and then the next day, without warning, you may just be so tired you might not want to even get out of bed. The difference between being an addict is your bad days can result in overdose and even death. And people with recurring illnesses like Lyme and diabetes aren't hated the way that addicts are for their disease. I believe it's because the result of an addict's bad day can be astronomically devastating for more than just themselves, as we can clearly see from this case. I have lost sleep over it, and I am in no way involved. It just bothers me immensely that everybody let this little girl down. Everyone. Start with the family. Adam and Crystal, the two people entrusted with this disabled girl's life, repeatedly dropped the ball. And I am aware that sobriety is a struggle, but at what point do you decide that your child's well-being and safety is more valuable? Even if you're unable to maintain your sobriety, giving up your parental rights is an option, and one that could have saved Harmony's life. If you love your child, and you need to admit that you're incapable of providing them what they need, what they deserve, stability. And listen, Kayla is just as much to blame. She had the chance to make a difference in Harmony's life, and instead she contributed to the fucking problem. Crystal alleged that Kayla seemed insecure about Adam's relationship with Harmony and the communication between him and Crystal, which is stupid. If you're going to be in a relationship with somebody who had children before you met, you have to be willing to accept that there is an entire package coming with that person, and that includes an ex and a child. The relationship between the parents has nothing to do with the child, and they shouldn't be the one to suffer because their caretakers failed at romance. Kayla should have been the one to think to herself, like, how would I want my children to be treated if we were in this situation? But selfish people are incapable of looking at the situation outside of themselves. Kevin and Michael claim that they were so worried about Harmony, but what more did they do other than allegedly making anonymous DCF reports? Why did they not contact the police directly? In my opinion, Kevin is suspicious in his own right. He had a GoFundMe campaign attempting to collect money for a reward, which there already is a reward. The GoFundMe was taken down, so I'm not sure if somebody reported it, but this just seems very sus to me. Moving on. Massachusetts plays an enormous role in this massive fuck up. Yeah, while the parents have the ultimate duty to protect their child and raise them, when this ability is compromised, the state is supposed to step in. The problem is that Harmony wasn't seen as a child in need, and this was even stated by family court judge Mark Newman, the clown who awarded custody to Adam. Harmony was just another name on a manila folder taking up valuable space on an overcrowded desk of a miserable social worker. DCF, along with the family courts, failed Harmony when they let a murder suspect, ex-con addict who barely knew his child, take custody of her, even after her foster mother made it clear that she felt Harmony needed a specialized environment that she couldn't even provide. What the hell made any state-involved employee feel that this inconsistent stranger could offer what Michelle could not? Would they feel comfortable leaving their children in Adam's care? What makes Harmony any different? The judge who gave Adam custody retired shortly after the case, and he's now getting scrutiny over it, as he absolutely should. The New Hampshire DCF worker, Demetrius Saros, was alleged to have called Crystal and Michelle bitter women who were simply trying to fuck over Adam. If this is true, I pray that he's being investigated as well. He's been interviewed previously about the shortage of workers in the Manchester DCF office and was quoted as saying, "It's a toxic work environment." He left the agency in 2020, but his demeanor throughout the article just seemed super arrogant. New Hampshire was quick to throw blame at Massachusetts, but they're just as culpable. There was such a lack of follow-up at the DCF office once they thought that Harmony was in Massachusetts. Supposedly they called Crystal once, but they couldn't confirm whether or not Harmony was in her care. And that was it for an entire year. The lack of communication between the states is just astounding. And this is the safety of a child at stake. I've had more anxiety about missing a haircut than they seem to have about a missing child. I understand that we were in a pandemic, but that doesn't mean that child abuse and neglect cease to exist. Just look at the David Allman case. I mentioned Bella Bond earlier, but recently there was another incident out of Fall River that required an OCA review. A 14-year-old autistic boy named David Allman was pronounced dead after being found unresponsive. He was emaciated and living in filth. His parents were addicts, and they left their needles and their stash out in the open. And this resulted in every single child in the house having fentanyl in their system. The family was DCF involved and had been reported by other family members leading up to the death, but social workers had only visited with the family virtually because COVID. How do you determine the safety and well-being of a child through Zoom, especially a child who is disabled or nonverbal? To me, it appears that the state believes that disabled children or the children of addicts just aren't as deserving of their time or effort. They continue to release these policy changes, yet children continue to perish under their supervision. At what point do you address your system and say it's foundationally flawed and design a more effective one? There just isn't a single person who was in Harmony's life that didn't let her down. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but when every member of that village turns their back on that child, it isn't just the child who suffers. In the long run, it perpetuates that cycle. Okay, let me lighten things up a little bit with some facts. I feel like I'm getting too deep into my rant. Crystal was one of 7 children, and I tried to find some information about the others so that we can include it for context. Robin, Crystal's mom, passed away in 2014, and according to her obituary, she lived life to the fullest, sadly leaving behind over a dozen grandchildren. Jason Sorry is Crystal's younger brother. He had trouble in the past, including breaking and entering at just 17 years old and assault and battery a few years later. Since then, he has been arrested for disturbance of the peace, providing false name and social security number to an officer in order to evade an arrest warrant, and it looks like he is currently in the Middlesex County House of Corrections. I couldn't tell you what for, though. a Fox News article that I found, literally just one, stated that both Jason and Crystal were involved with the 2014 shooting that Adam was jailed for, but it's literally the only source I could find, and it's Fox News. Jared Flanagan was another one of the older boys in the Sorry household. He, like Jason, was no stranger to the police, racking up charges for drug possession and intent to distribute, domestic disturbance. I think he was also arrested for being a fugitive from Florida. Scrolling through his Facebook, though, Jared appeared to be a chef at some point, and he also had a couple kids. The last photo that he had posted of himself, he appeared really healthy and happy, and he was with his kids. Sadly, Jared passed away last year at only 39. Not much could be learned about Crystal's brothers, Michael and Jamie, with the exception that the latter had passed away sometime before 2014. Trying to find a Michael Flanagan in Boston is quite a joke, honestly. But I did find some information about the oldest brother, Tim Flanagan. So I cropped a lot of the photos, the most recent ones that I could find of Tim, because they all included his children. And although it's public information, I don't like to include pictures of children unless it's a child that we're speaking about specifically. But he is a very proud dad, and he has his oldest son is actually in the military, who seemed to follow in Tim's footsteps. Tim and his wife married in 2016, and they live in Florida, which is the retirement home of most Massachusetts expats. From all outward appearances, it seems like Tim's life is successful. Honestly, the only red flag that I spotted was his MAGA hat. Joking aside, let me delve back into the more serious stuff for a second. Another huge reason that Massachusetts failed Harmony was their lack of an ICPC, or what's known as an interstate compact on the placement of a child. This process should have been done before custody was even awarded to Adam. I recently have dealt with an interstate custody case myself out of a neighboring state, and despite the fact that my husband and I have never been DCF involved, our children have lived with us their entire lives, we were required to complete a national background check, which included fingerprinting, a home study, and a DCF assessment to adopt. So I'm not sure how two parents in their circumstances were able to gain custody of Harmony repeatedly. And this brings me to our next point, which is permanent placement in the best interest of a child. Because there isn't a real legal definition as to what is in the best interest of a child. It's totally subjective, and it applies to an individual basis. And while I think that Crystal was under the impression that she could potentially provide this permanent placement for Harmony, it just wasn't working out at the detriment of her own child. The foster mother, Michelle, even addressed this concern with DCF. At what point does DCF file for termination of parental rights and work on adoption rather than reunification? Her goal was changed once, but it doesn't seem like a serious attempt was put forward to find an adoptive home for Harmony. Jameson was placed rather quickly, and at the same time that custody was being given to Adam. So if they were willing to give custody to Adam, who was essentially a stranger at this point to Harmony, why not consider letting the Millers, who were adopting Jameson, attempt to foster her? It would have been in her best interest to be with her sibling, He could have provided some sort of security for her, and the Millers had already inquired whether Harmony needed placement. So why were they denied? Because they were in the process of reunification with Adam? But Adam was essentially a stranger to Harmony, so why would they not consider the Millers? Truthfully, I'm surprised Adam even had parental rights in the state of Massachusetts, because Massachusetts is a state where children born out of wedlock aren't considered legitimized, and in order to do this, the parents have to be married before the child is born, or you have to file for legitimation. I am not fucking joking. I only know this because I have experience with a similar situation out of Massachusetts. And it's not until paternity is established in those forms, or this is how I think it was established, through the Department of Revenue, when a paternity request is established legally, usually when child support is being requested. But I am not a lawyer, so don't come for me. This is just me thinking out loud. I feel like I kind of grew to understand Crystal by listening to her interviews and reading through, hours of research. But I still have a lot of problems with how her actions led to where the case stands today. She said that one of the biggest obstacles she faced after sobriety was housing. Yet she found spots in shelters all over the state. And I know that Massachusetts offers vouchers for Section 8 and also for subsidized housing, or projects as they're called, which, while they're not ideal, are, still it's a starting point. I totally understand the waiting list can take forever, but there is emergency housing options available out there. Another thing that she mentioned was that her lawyer was at first full of hope, but quickly lost it with her and allowed Adam to take custody of Harmony as a result. And it's this is a massive accusation to make, one that can't really be substantiated. Had she communicated her wishes for that specific court date, clearly, maybe in writing, she could then prove her claim. But essentially, she should have just asked her lawyer to file a motion to extend. I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm just saying it seems like a lot of excuses. I'm not trying to assign blame at all. It's just that she, like Adam, claimed they were unable to make, scheduled visitations due to a lack of transportation. But Massachusetts, especially the greater Boston area, has pretty remarkable public transportation. And I am pretty sure that DCF and or the Department of Transitional Assistance would have been more than willing to work with them to provide bus passes. When I was a recipient of Massachusetts benefits, which these include Mass Health, food stamps, cash assistance, things like that, I would also get bus passes because I can't drive. So, when I needed to get to my appointments, they would give me a handful of bus passes and I would use them for what I needed. But I can sit here and say that I would walk through broken glass barefoot to get to my kids. The thing is, I'm also sober, so my judgment isn't clouded by the thought of where my next high is going to come from. This is a harsh reality that is shoved in your face with this case, and that's why I think that it catches so many people's attention. It brings to light a variety of issues that have been bubbling and just waiting to boil over. Okay, let's finish this off with some random tidbits. Supposedly, Adam had gang ties to a group called Gangsters Disciples. I grew up in a pretty shitty neighborhood, so I heard of a lot of different gangs, but I have never heard of this one. And I Googled it, and it says that they're out of Chicago, so I'm not sure how they ended up in New Hampshire, let alone how Adam Montgomery was initiated. But he's got this stupid teardrop tattoo, which makes him look like a bigger douchebag. I edited this script to add that the True Crime channel, that chapter, actually just uploaded a video today about these murders that occurred in Mount Vernon, New Hampshire. And the perpetrators of that crime were part of a gang called Disciples of Destruction. So I'm wondering if that's kind of the same thing. Anyway, I'm not tattoo shaming Adam because I have loads of tattoos. It's what he decided to tattoo on him that I'm shaming him for. I would do the same thing to somebody who decided that it was a wise choice to get like a swastika tattooed on them because, listen, you can get Bugs Bunny making out with Donald Duck if that's what makes you happy, but when you start to cross the territory into like hate pride, that's when it becomes a problem. The man that Adam shot in the face, Robbie Jacobs, he's survived. And he was just possibly arrested recently in connection to a murder of a Brockton teenager back in 2006. I couldn't be sure it was the same Robert Jacobs since it's kind of a pretty generic name. But what are the odds? Crystal recalled a time when the play therapist relayed to her that Harmony seemed very frightened of the bathroom while playing with the dollhouse. And Crystal kind of like determined out of talking to her that Harmony had been held down in the bathtub by Kayla and Adam. And they scrubbed her privates and told her that she was dirty. This angers me on such a profound level. Whether she is his child or not, he had zero right to be scrubbing her genitals, nor did Kayla. She was old enough to wash herself, and if she was having trouble or having gynecological issues, then it's time to intervene and take her to like a doctor to be diagnosed. It's not up to him to hold her down in a bathtub and scrub her privates while he degrades her. Like the fucking trauma they put that little girl through. I can only imagine. Around the same time as her disappearance, Adam and Kayla had been hanging around with Adam's quote-unquote stepsister. Her name was Tabitha Scott, and she's another gem. She was supposedly like sharing photos on Facebook of her and Harmony, and it showed Harmony with like a lump on her head, but I could not find this photo. I'm not sure if it was something that was like sent to Crystal, but it's definitely not on the internet from where I can find. However, I was able to find these really weird close photos of Adam and Tabby. Crystal alleges that Tabby told a friend that she was the last person to see Harmony alive. And given this woman's arrest record, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. She had been arrested in connection with multiple shootings, including one involving police officers. She was arrested for possession of heroin, and most recently for allowing a woman who is accused of killing her child to use her jailhouse phone calls in order to set up a hit on her boyfriend. I want to make another video, like a commentary video, discussing the interrogation footage of Adam that was recently released. I have a plethora of notes about it, and I don't want to seem like I was just kind of giving Crystal all this heat. Trust me, I have reserved rage for Adam coming his way. Before I forget, though, let me mention that there is one more person in this story, and that is Brittany Rose, who is Crystal's twin. She struggled with substance abuse as well, and it really seemed like the two of them played off each other. They influenced each other's sobriety, because you can see in the timeline that I created in the sources page on my Google Drive that when Brittany would be arrested for like drug related charges, soon after Crystal would relapse and she would lose Harmony. And Harmony wasn't the only sorry child to go missing. Very recently, Haverhill police put out a post letting people know that 9-year-old Taya Sorry had been missing, but she was ultimately found, luckily. But holy shit, what the hell? I don't even know how circumstances like that happen, but it doesn't look good given Harmony's situation. Brittany is looking healthier now, though, in her recent photos, so I really hope that's a good sign for her sobriety. Also, a side note, I did find an article about a woman named Brittany Sorry out of Florida who was arrested for false rape allegations. And that ended up leading to her friend shooting her alleged rapist in supposed self-defense. I can't confirm whether these are the same Britneys, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless, especially because it happened in the same area that Tim Flanagan lives in. And Crystal once lived in Florida, so it's kind of crazy. Let's wrap this up because I'm sure I have been going on for way too long now. I just want to suggest to my listeners that maybe they consider volunteering with an underprivileged youth. It can be 1 hour a month or 2 days a week. It doesn't matter how much time, just that it's your time. And it can truly make a difference in a child's life. A 24-hour tip line has been set up with a reward of $144,000. Contact the Manchester, New Hampshire Police tip line at 603-203-6060. Tips can also be texted or call. It doesn't make a difference. Again, that number is 603-203-6060, and that'll be in the description box. Otherwise, I'm still working on my dark topic video. It's going to be part of a series on this channel, but I heard about this case while I was listening to Crime Circus. Shout out to Crime Circus. They're an awesome channel. And then I had to stop exactly what I was doing and check it out because it just caught my attention like that. Honestly, I'm not trying to drag this out any further, so I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I mean, as much as you could, despite the length. Hit the like, subscribe if you want to hear some more. I'm trying to release episodes every Wednesday for Wicked Words Wednesday, but I have seemed to have been having a lot of trouble with the programs that I use or just recording in general. I'm really trying, guys. Check out my other videos if you haven't already, and feel free to give me your case suggestions or feedback below. Other than that, I'll catch you on the flip side.